In the previous videos, we talked about echinoderms with their versatile shapes, mollusks that adapt against the odds, struggle to survive arthropods, etc. But today, the group of animals I'm going to discuss gives me a completely different impression. They are like ghosts in the deep sea, tranquil and detached from the earthly realm. They are none other than jellyfish. Strictly speaking, most jellyfish are considered planktonic organisms. They lack a proper propulsion system and can only drift in the ocean, carried by the currents, with their lightweight and transparent bodies. They lack any significant central nervous system, and their sensory systems are limited to a few light-sensitive spots and balance organs. They have no consciousness and no sensation. In every sense, they resemble drifting phantoms in the ocean. Yet, the evolutionary path they have taken is remarkably peculiar. Due to their gelatinous bodies with high water content, once a jellyfish dies, its body decomposes rapidly, vanishing within a few hours. This makes jellyfish one of the most challenging animals to fossilize. Only under extremely rare circumstances do they leave faint traces in rock layers, hinting at their past existence. However, the origin of jellyfish is quite ancient. Many of the animals we mentioned earlier originated from the Cambrian explosion. But as one of the earliest branches of the animal kingdom, jellyfish have a history even older than the Cambrian. They trace back to a lesser-known event called the Avalon explosion. If the Cambrian explosion brought forth a diverse and colorful animal world, then the Avalon explosion gave rise to the animals themselves. This explosion occurred at a delicate moment in time when the Earth had just emerged from the second intense ice age event since its formation, the prolonged snowball Earth event that lasted for 200 million years. After a long hiatus, sunlight finally bathed the ocean depths once again. This long-awaited abundance nourished a massive quantity of bacteria and other single-celled organisms in the ocean, depositing a thick microbial mat on the seafloor. The resurgence of algae also allowed the atmospheric oxygen levels to surpass a critical threshold. In this environment, the earliest visible animals emerged, the Ediacaran Biota. These animals were different from the animals we know today. They didn't need to actively move or develop highly complex organs. Instead, they simply spread themselves like pancakes on the microbial mat, directly absorbing endless nutrients. Some transformed themselves into feather-like shapes and floated while rooted to the seafloor, attracting suspended single-celled organisms in the seawater to come to them. From any perspective, this was a paradise that intoxicated the animals. Due to the ease of survival, the Ediacaran animals embarked on countless incredible evolutionary explorations, creating an era of unparalleled morphological diversity in the animal kingdom. However, this feast of nature's gift ultimately came to an end. It may have been due to excessive depletion of the microbial mat, or perhaps the single-celled organisms gradually developed means to defend against animal predation. Animals could no longer passively exist. Various peculiar evolutionary adaptations had to consider the challenge of survival. Some animals learned to burrow in the microbial mat, while others, like Sprigina, developed the ability to crawl and used specialized sensory organs to search for food. Some, like Cambrian, even evolved specialized feeding organs to scrape food. Among them, there was a creature called Hosha, which evolved a cup-shaped body and used its 4 tentacles to stir the water, driving small organisms and organic debris into its cup. This clever tactic was enough to ensure survival in that era. Starting from this Gothic-shaped cup, this lineage of animals crossed the vast expanse of history, enduring successive catastrophic events. Over the next 600 million years, although the appearance of these animals underwent significant changes, they maintained the fundamental body plan, giving rise to the group of animals known as Cnidaria. During the early Cambrian, the Cnidarians continued the ancestral habit of living off the environment, just like their predecessors. For example, Xiangwanga sinica, millions of years ago, evolved its tentacles into feather-like structures and switched to active filter feeding. However, with the Cambrian explosion, a symmetrical animal revolution began to emerge, with features such as eyes, appendages, and shells appearing. The relationships between animals transformed from simple competition to fierce predatory struggles, ultimately disrupting the order of the Ediacaran Biota. For the ancient lineage of Cnidarians, it was the first time they faced a survival crisis, and in the intense evolutionary war, if they didn't want to become prey, they had to become hunters. During the early Cambrian, Cnidarians equipped their tentacles with a sophisticated type of cell called cnidocytes. These cells are essentially miniature venomous harpoons, capable of sensing contact with other objects and rapidly ejecting a stinging barb. This skill turned Cnidarians into some of the earliest predators on Earth. At this stage, Cnidarians already bore a strong resemblance in appearance to modern-day sea anemones or hydras. However, due to the lack of bilateral symmetry and a central nervous system, Cnidarians were limited in their ability to actively hunt prey. Nevertheless, the simple body structure of Cnidarians endowed them with tremendous evolutionary potential. They inherited the explorations of animal evolution from the Ediacaran Biota, paving the way for a unique evolutionary path unlike anything else in the world. This exploration bloomed into the fantastical marine entity we know as the jellyfish during the early Cambrian. This life form seemed like a product of dreams from the very beginning. To this day, the origin of jellyfish remains unclear, and everything can only be based on speculation. Cnidarians have the ability to clone themselves by budding, which was a common ability among early animals. However, Cnidarians took this ability to a new level. As the seafloor became more crowded during the Cambrian, some early sessile Cnidarians faced the risk of resource competition from other organisms. In response, they allowed the newly budded clones to remain attached to themselves, sharing nutrients among them. These new individuals continued to bud, and countless clones united, forming a thriving tree-like structure. However, unlike a photosynthetic tree, this was a predatory tree. Each Cnidarian clone in the tree extended its tentacles with cnidocytes to capture and absorb nutrients from small prey, supplying the entire organism. The reproductive process of Cnidarians was similar to plants, as they released eggs and sperm into the water, relying on chance encounters for fertilization. Driven by selfish genes, the initially identical clones in this tree evolved differences. Some clones transformed into specialized reproductive individuals, responsible for releasing eggs or sperm, resembling beautiful flowers blooming on this marvelous tree. But it doesn't end there. Since there are few underwater creatures willing to risk their lives to assist Cnidarians in reproduction, some Cnidarians decided to let these flower-like structures detach themselves. After all, they were essentially independent clones capable of survival, so let them drift away and find partners on their own. Over time, these detached structures became more developed. Equipped with rudimentary sensory organs and tentacles covered in stinging cells, Cnidarians acquired a completely new life form, the jellyfish body. Correspondingly, the original plant-like sessile life form was referred to as the hydra body. With the passage of time, it becomes difficult to determine which one is the true form, the jellyfish body or the hydra body. The jellyfish body releases eggs and sperm into the seawater. Fertilized eggs develop into seed-like larvae, called planula larvae, which then settle on the seafloor and grow. They form a tree composed of hydra bodies and continue to grow, blossoming with flowers. As these flowers fall, they transform into new jellyfish bodies, continuing this cycle of life that has spanned hundreds of millions of years. Some Cnidarians can even reverse this cycle at will, like the Turritopsis nutricula, whose jellyfish body can sink to the seafloor and transform back into a hydra body. The hydra body can then bloom into a jellyfish once again. Some may call this immortality, but can we really measure life and death by our standards when it comes to life forms like Cnidarians? Countless clones of Cnidarians gathered together to form a collective entity. Within this collective, some individuals specialize in reproduction. I'm sure this reminds some viewers of something. In fact, there is a group of Cnidarians known as Siphonophores that has already taken a step ahead. They have evolved into a form of life that we might call a superorganism. The individuals within a Siphonophore colony have complex functional differentiation. Most of the colony's body is elongated, resembling a strange worm. If you observe closely, you'll notice that the individual at the front end of this worm-like structure transforms into an air-filled float, guiding the movement of the entire column of bodies. Following the float are a series of pulsating individuals called necticoluses, which serve as the power source of this giant creature. Behind them, there are numerous trailing threads, consisting of feeding individuals responsible for nutrition and reproductive individuals carrying reproductive cells. These animals, with their extremely simple body structures, assemble in such an indescribable array of life, roaming in the dark and mysterious depths of the ocean. There is another group of Siphonophores that is more familiar to humans, including the well-known Portuguese man-o'-war. These Siphonophores have lost the pulsating necticoluses that serve as the power source, but they have well-developed floats that allow them to float on the sea surface. Their floats often bear triangular sails, enabling them to drift with the wind. Beneath these intricate sails, the feeding individuals and reproductive individuals are densely packed, laying down traps made of stinging threads in the seawater. Regardless of how the overall shape changes, each individual within these Siphonophore colonies has become highly specialized and is no longer capable of living independently. Recall that the earliest forms of life were simple prokaryotic cells. Later, some prokaryotic cells came together to form a collective entity, with each member performing a specific role, leading to the evolution of complex eukaryotic cells. Then, some eukaryotic cells assembled into a collective, with cellular differentiation occurring internally, giving rise to multicellular organisms. And now, the Cnidarians have gathered these multicellular individuals into a collective entity with individual specialization. While other animals compete for the position of Earth's dominator, turning the Earth into a battleground, Cnidarians, often regarded as primitive species, seem to have silently opened a new chapter in the evolution of life on Earth, operating on a higher dimension.